couple of things. We were back up for 12, and if anybody remembers Pete Conrad, you'll know that he was a jokester. But he was also a little short guy. So we kind of doctored up his checklist with all sorts of things like pictures from Playboy and a few things like that. But the one thing we concentrated on was, what is Pete going to say when he gets on the surface? So we came up with this little slogan for Pete. If you remember what Neil said when he got down. So we had this little thing for Pete, and it goes sort of like, that might have been one small step for Neil, but it was a big step for me. But what I remember on the home flight, and it may not be all that funny, but it was kind of funny in the flight. As we were launching and getting to the end of the first stage burn, the routine was that, at least that's what we were told, is that the explosive bolts would fire, and then little retro rockets would pull the first stage back, and then the second stage would light and on we'd go. What happened in reality was that the retro rockets fired first, then the explosive bolts. So we went from 4.5 Gs forward acceleration to about a half a G instantaneously. And I remember Jim Irwin and I are sitting there with our hands up, trying to stay out of the instrument panel, both of us looking at Dave, who had been there before. We said, gee, Dave, that really was a surprise. And he said, gee, guys, I forgot to tell you. So the first night we get into orbit, and we're trying to get some sleep, and it's the first night when you get into space is a little different. We had sleeping bags that would come up to the neck, and you crawl in the sleeping bag, we tie it off at both ends so it's kind of floating, and you try to go to sleep. But as you try to go to sleep, your head starts to wander on you, and I'll say, if it's kind of like, have any of you ever had that feeling as you're going to sleep of falling off a cliff? Anybody had that feeling? Well, that's what we were doing, falling off that cliff. And so finally I had to unzip my sleeping bag, or my hammock, or whatever it was, with that fishnet we made them out of, and I put my head where my shoulder should be and zipped it up past it. It restricted my head, and I'd go to sleep, and it was fine. Got up in the morning, and I had the worst backache I've ever had in my life. And Jim did too. So we're looking at Dave and said, that's kind of funny. We didn't expect that. They said, oh, gee, guys, I forgot to tell you about that. So there were a lot of things that Jim and I had to figure out on our own.